I knew something was wrong the moment I saw the drilling trucks. There were 6 of them. Heavy equipment, fuel tankers, survey vehicles, and a massive steel rig sitting just beyond the fence of my ranch. I stood on my porch staring at them in disbelief. Nobody had asked me. Nobody had called me. And I certainly hadn't signed an oil lease. Then I noticed the HOA president's SUV parked beside the entrance. Karen Whitmore stepped out, carrying a folder. She looked almost proud. I walked toward her. What are those trucks doing on my property? Karen smiled. Your property? Yes, my ranch. She laughed. Not anymore. I stopped walking. What does that mean? She opened the folder. The HOA has signed an oil development agreement covering this entire section of the community. I stared at her. You signed an oil lease on my ranch. Technically, the association negotiated it. For how much? Karen smiled. $82 million. For a second, I thought I had misheard her. $82 million? She nodded. The oil company estimates the reserves are substantial. I looked toward the drilling rig. Where did you get permission to drill? Karen pointed toward a map. The HOA owns the mineral rights. I took the map from her. The boundary lines were wrong. Very wrong. This isn't your land. Karen rolled her eyes. Your ranch is inside the development boundary. That doesn't mean you own it. She smiled. You agreed to the community covenants. I don't live in your community. You're surrounded by it. That still doesn't make my ranch yours. Karen's expression hardened. Stop making this difficult. I looked at the drilling equipment. Stop drilling. She laughed. You can't stop an $82 million project. I pulled out my phone. Watch me. That afternoon, I called an attorney. He asked me to send every document I had. I searched my office, then my grandfather's old storage room. I found tax records, old surveys, property maps, but nothing seemed to settle the issue completely. Then I remembered something. My grandfather had always kept one particular document locked away. He used to call it the original. I searched through an old wooden chest. Inside were photographs, handwritten letters, and dusty envelopes. At the bottom was a folded document. The paper was yellowed with age. The date was stamped across the top. 1953. I unfolded it. It was a deed. My grandfather had purchased the ranch decades before the HOA existed. I read the legal description. Then I read it again. The boundaries were unmistakable. The ranch was separate property. The HOA had no ownership, no control, and no authority to sign an oil lease covering it. I immediately sent the deed to my attorney. He called me within minutes. Where did you find this? In my grandfather's chest. He was silent for a moment. Then he said, This changes everything. The next morning, we went to the county records office. The clerk pulled up the property history. The 1953 deed was still recorded. And there was something else. The HOA had never acquired the ranch. Not through purchase. Not through easement. Not through transfer. Nothing. The oil lease was based on a boundary assumption. An assumption worth $82 million. My attorney looked at me. They signed a lease for land they don't own. I smiled. Then let's make sure everyone knows. 2 days later, I stood outside the drilling site with my attorney. The oil company's project manager approached us. We have authorization from the HOA. I handed him a copy of the 1953 deed. He read it, then looked at the survey, then back at me. Are you the property owner? Yes. He immediately called his legal department. The drilling stopped. Completely. The workers shut down the equipment. The truck stopped moving, and Karen's confidence disappeared. She arrived less than an hour later. What happened? The project manager pointed toward me. He owns the land. Karen stared at the deed. No. I handed her a copy. She looked at the date. Then she looked at the legal description. Her face went pale. But the HOA approved the lease. You approved a lease on someone else's property. She shook her head. We believed the land was part of the association. That belief is an ownership. The oil company eventually suspended the entire project pending a legal review. Then came the lawsuits. The oil company wanted out of the lease. The HOA wanted to defend the agreement, and I wanted one simple thing: my property left alone. During the investigation, another discovery came out. The HOA board had discussed the oil project months before anyone told homeowners. They had already planned how to divide the potential revenue. They had even prepared promotional material describing the ranch as community-controlled mineral land. They weren't just mistaken. They had built an entire financial plan around property they didn't own. The HOA meeting that followed was packed. Karen sat at the front of the room. I placed the 1953 deed on the table. This document predates this HOA by decades. Nobody spoke. Then I placed a modern property survey beside it. The boundaries haven't changed. A homeowner raised his hand. So how did the HOA sign the lease? Karen couldn't answer. Another homeowner asked, where was the title search? Silence. Then the HOA's attorney finally admitted the lease had been signed without a complete title verification. The room erupted. Homeowners were furious. They had been promised millions in community revenue. Now they were facing legal expenses and a massive contractual dispute. As for the $82 million, it never became the HOA's money because the oil company had never legally obtained the right to drill on my ranch. The drilling equipment was removed. The land was restored. And the HOA was forced to acknowledge something it should have known from the beginning. A neighborhood boundary doesn't override a property deed. A board vote doesn't create ownership. And an $82 million oil lease doesn't become valid simply because someone signs it. I still keep the 1953 deed in a safe. It's just one old piece of paper. Yellowed, faded, easy to overlook. But that little document stopped an $82 million deal. And it proved that sometimes the most powerful weapon against an HOA isn't money. It's the truth written on paper decades before they ever arrived.